Talk to me about the food piece. I know you said like one of the big things you were realizing as you started to take this more seriously was like, hey, maybe I'm under eating here. CrossFit can be a pretty intense sport, especially at your level. You certainly need a good balance of food and the right kind of macronutrients, but also the quality. And I've saw you've got a bit more bullish these days on ground beef and burgers and red meat. So I love to see that. Talk to me about the evolution of your food journey.
Yeah, it's been quite an evolution from one of my favorite meals multiple times a week prior to this journey was pizza. Still love pizza. I love bread. I love pasta. I don't eat much of those things now, but I used to love them. And my journey when I started CrossFit, I started to understand a little bit more about uh, overeating and started to shed some things out of my diet early in my journey. So I went from eating cereal, even healthy cereal, wheat checks, grape nuts, if you remember those. I ate a giant bowl of grape nuts for breakfast and a cup of coffee with a bunch of creamer and be dead tired 2 hours later. And I never understood why. Didn't make any sense to me until I started to understand that that's just a big giant bowl of sugar when it comes down to it. So I switched right around the time I started CrossFit. I started eating broccoli and eggs for breakfast. I just made that a new habit, and I often made that my lunch too. So in that first year, I was fully satiated. I felt great. I wasn't hungry, and I was eating whatever my wife made for dinner. So, but my calories went way down, and I lost weight. I went from 205 pounds to probably about 190 pounds. I think the lightest I ever was 185 pounds, and opened my own CrossFit gym. So now I was coaching. I was on my feet 6 hours a day, training 2 to 3 hours a day, eating probably 2,000, 2,400 calories a day. And again, I was very, I looked aesthetically great. I mean, I had pretty low body fat at the time, but I wasn't sleeping well. And even though I was training a lot, I had found some stagnation along the way. I didn't understand the connection between that and my food sources or anything like that. Was eating a good amount of chicken and eggs. This was kind of my primary diet. And it was around 2018, just, around the year I qualified for the CrossFit Games, I started to understand that, we do need more calories. I needed more carbohydrates in my life in order to sustain my lifestyle, the activity that I was involved in. So in tracking that, working with a nutritionist, I realized I needed probably more like 3,000 calories a day. And when I started, the week I went from 2,400 to 3,000 calories a day, I felt full. I felt terrible for that week. It didn't feel right. All of the guilt, the old fat guy that I used to be, and I wasn't that fat, but I was afraid that I was going to get fat. I was afraid I was going to get fluffy. I mean, that was a big fear. Uh, I was nervous, but I just trusted the math and started eating around 3,000 calories a day. At that time, it was absolutely no grain whatsoever. So it was a lot of sweet potatoes, a lot of chicken, a lot of ground beef, not emphasizing anything at the time. But in eating enough food, I started getting stronger and I started having more energy and I actually gained a little weight. So I did go, I think it was 187 pounds at the CrossFit Games in 2018. In 2019, I was probably 193 pounds, somewhere in that range. Uh, that's 5 years ago. Now I sit at about 200 pounds on average. I might go up to 205 pounds, somewhere between 200 and 205 pounds right now. But over the past 3 or 4 years, I've been paying more attention to um, not just the caloric intake that I need, and I have added rice back to my life, jasmine white rice. It makes getting carbohydrates easier for me to get enough carbohydrates. White rice is helpful. But I've started to take a look at where my food sources come from and realizing red meat in particular and the benefits and the broad nutrient density that's in red meat, uh, especially grass-fed red meat. Um, I've made that a much bigger part of my life over the past 2 years, to the point where I have a pound of ground beef or some sort of red meat at least 5 days a week, 5 nights a week. So I take a look at the sources on where that beef is produced. So when I go to the store, it's not just any of the grass-fed beefs that's on I find my brand that I've done research on, because I want to know that it was pasture-raised beef, and I want to know that it was grass-finished. And I'm looking for 10% lean, or 15%. I'm sorry, 85 or 90%. Those are both fine with me. And I often get questioned, does my wife love this lifestyle? Eating ground beef every night, or red meat every night. And no, she certainly doesn't, but she understands, and she'll accommodate quite a bit. Like, she might make we'll have spaghetti, and that's a version of me getting a pound of ground beef. I'll have chickpea noodles instead of like regular noodles, but that's a great meal. Tonight is my first day back after being out of town for a few days. And although we were out of town for a few days, we had grass-fed beef because I'm with some like-minded thinkers out there. So we ate well. And she's like, hey, so I'll make burgers tonight. I'm like, yes, back home, sweet home, back to like where I love to be. And this time she'll mix in chicken, or she'll mix in fish. And I'll begrudgingly let her know how much I don't want to eat that, and I want just red meat. But there's nothing wrong with having those as well. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just by preference. Both the taste, flavor, the satiation, and the nutrient density, the nutrient profile. And I've done a lot of research around that to discover, and my own blood work to ensure that what I've discovered is that I am the healthiest version of myself over the past 2 years, on average, eating 5 pounds of grass-fed beef a week, at least, often more. And when I have got nervous, right, I get my blood work done twice a week just to make sure everything's fine. And the more I dial this in, even eating, whole eggs, egg yolks, animal products and more animal products, and making sure that, even if I'm snacking, I'm starting to try to find chips that are made with beef tallow, as opposed to anything, right? And adding salt to my life, not, I wouldn't say copious amounts of it, but much more salt to my life. And then again, being aware and checking my blood pressure, checking my blood work to see that, yeah, for me, this is the healthiest that my blood work has been, eating this way. So eating enough is half the battle for me. And then, and it's definitely not the cheapest way to eat. I sacrifice things in my life to make sure that we can afford. For me, it's $11 for a pound of grass-fed ground beef, and as a family, we'll have 2 or 3 pounds of that a day. So, it's not easy, but it's what we do.
All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.